from this online meeting. So
Thank you very much for inviting me.
so first, I want to know your personal journey with languages. So, we know a lot of things, even not a lot of it, because you have your own blog, you have your own website, and you also, we can find something um, like to get your stories, like also from this book. We know you not only a researcher, a linguist, but also a journalist, a singer, and also even I'm not sure, but think you are also kind of geek. I mean, maybe not very, I want to say geeker, right?
I didn't quite get
Yeah,
that. You mean language geek or what is?
not language geek, but you also have your own app, right? Your,
Ah, yes. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's no longer functional, unfortunately, but I did make that, yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's no
yeah, yeah, yeah.
longer on the market.
But you develop yourself, or
No, the technical side was I outsourced that to specialists, to experts. I
uh-huh.
only wrote the content, let's say.
Okay, okay. So for me, first we are very curious about your personal journey with languages. What sparks your interest in linguistics? This question is not only a question about we want to know the author yourself, but your journey. I think it can inspire many young people in China
Mm,
to
mm.
pursue from your book, or also pursue from your story, to to love language, to grow up.
Well, I remember receiving a
Yeah.
few, I mean, I've received many emails after writing this book, and a few of them were from young people who had decided after reading it to study linguistics, and that pleased me no end. I mean, I really enjoyed the idea that I had inspired a few people to do that. That was very gratifying. But in answer to your question, um, I've often wondered, and I've often been asked why I'm so interested in languages in the first place. And I think there are several reasons. For one thing, I grew up in the Netherlands, right? I'm from the Netherlands, and I grew up in a part of the Netherlands in the very south, which is a very multilingual area because we do not only have the Dutch language, which is our national language, but also this regional language, which is called Limburgish, and which nobody in China would have heard about, I'm sure, and for a good reason because it's small. But it's somewhat different. I guess it's like Mandarin and Cantonese or so. It's really quite different. But we were also near the German language area, that's only 25 kilometers, and we're near the French language area, that's another 25 kilometers. And on Dutch television, in my childhood and also today, you hear a lot of English. American TV shows, American films, British comedies, all of that. And of course, pop music, which is also mostly English language here in Western Europe. So that exposure to so many languages led me to realize very early on how different they are and how interesting they are. Also, my father was a French teacher, and my mother was the sort of lady who would read the newspaper with a red pen in her hand to correct errors, to correct linguistic mistakes. So I was sort of primed, I think. And once I started to learn more about languages and also to learn to speak some languages, I discovered that it has so many connections to other fields of learning that I also find interesting, like history. I mean, the connection between linguistics and history, I think, is quite obvious, right? I mean, languages have changed through time. Historical events have had a strong impact on who speaks which language, where, and in what way, etc. That is true all over the world. but it also has to do with psychology and neurology. The way we speak says a lot about who we are as humans in general and our particular individuality, perhaps. There is a strong connection with literature, obviously. Literature is written in language, but you also see the changes in language through history. I mean, I can't read Chinese, not at all, but I know that when you take old Chinese poetry, it is very different from modern poetry, and that is very interesting to study. I mean, I know that about my own language, but I'm sure that is also, I'm absolutely sure that is even more true for Chinese with its long, very long history. Then there is the link with politics and administration. I mean, governments will choose official languages, and they will regulate perhaps official languages, and they will give co-official status to some regional languages, etc., etc. There's also economics. Languages spoken by economically strong countries will spread, whereas languages spoken in weaker countries or poorer countries will have less impact on the outside world. There are all these sorts of connections, which I find very interesting. There's yet another thing, and that's very personal, very individual, but it may also be true for some of your for our listeners. Personally, I have a sort of analytical sort of mind. I like to pick things apart in my head. Now, one possible outlet for that sort of talent or tendency would be to work in technology. But for technology, you need to be good with your hands. And I am not good with my hands. I'm the sort of person who can pick apart a thing, but not reassemble it, because all the parts will be broken and there's just no way I can repair anything. So I'd better stick to analyzing it in my mind, in my head. And you can do that very well with languages. You can't break languages. They will always remain intact. But then it could have been something else, of course, like geology or ornithology. But in my personal case, it was linguistics. So that's where my interest comes from, my being interested in languages. And then the journey went on. I became a journalist for very different reasons. I wanted to write about different issues, more like sustainable development and things like that. But at some point, this interest in language crept into my writing, and it has remained there ever since. And you mentioned the fact that indeed you have done your research very well. I was a singer for like 8 or 9 years, a singer-songwriter, and that is because I like to write. Well, I try to write nice language, beautiful language. I try to write in a maybe poetic, but also humorous way. That's just part of my character, of who I am. And I have tried to do that in Lingo. And well, it's up to the reader to decide if I have managed to do it, but that's where it comes from. I have this desire to use language for something that is beautiful and entertaining, as well as informative and enlightening. So that is, I suppose that's the journalist in myself. I want to give people information, and the singer-songwriter wants to entertain.
Yeah. Very interesting. So yeah, I guess you already mentioned that the second we question we prepared, that the process of reaching and writing about the different languages. So can you share more your methods, your thinking about this process? So how to reach to the different languages? You know,
yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. The research and the writing, right?
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, that has really changed over time. I wrote my first book about languages in the late 1990s, so that's over 25 years ago. That book was published only in Dutch. It would not be, you can't find it in English. And back in those days, it was quite hard to find good information. I mean, of course, there were libraries, good libraries, and there were experts at universities and places like that. But to find good information about specialized issues such as languages and small languages, that was a really time-consuming job. And that, of course, as we all know, has changed completely. I mean, nowadays, information is everywhere, and it's so accessible online. It's so to speak, sloshing all over the internet. Both the information itself and also references to additional scholarly sources. So research has really become much easier. However, I'm not suggesting that everyone can do it or that everyone can do it equally well, because you still need knowledge to separate, well, as I say in English, the wheat from the chaff, to separate, to distinguish what's good information from what's bad information, and what's reliable and what's not reliable. And even today with AI, with artificial intelligence, that's still true, because AIs are brilliant in their way, but they also make brilliant mistakes. I mean, and you probably, well, I'm sure you know that these AI platforms, they can hallucinate very convincingly. So you really have to still have this scholarly attitude, this critical scholarly attitude, and a willingness to verify everything that AI will throw at you, because otherwise you are not using AI, but you're used by it, so to speak. You're tricked by it. Okay, so that's the research part. There's the writing part, which is really different. I mean, first there's the research, and then there's the writing.
Yeah.
And that hasn't changed so much. I mean, the last big change was the personal computer, but that has been around for over 30 years now. And in writing, I think style is as important as it has always been. Weaving the information into a good story that will grip the reader, hopefully, and enlighten, inform the reader. That is as important as it ever was, and perhaps even more so, because nowadays readers are really spoiled for choice. I mean, there's so much for them to choose from. There are all these well, I mean, of course, I don't know what is available in Mandarin. I'm guessing that is a lot. I'm familiar with the English-speaking world, and there are so many books and videos and podcasts and whatnot. Readers really have so much to choose from, and then as a writer, you have to try and make it as good and as attractive as possible, so that they will choose my book and not something else, because I want it. There's no point in writing if you don't have a reader. So the research has changed a lot, and the writing has stayed more or less the same. Style is still important, and there is more competition, you might say. That's the story in short.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I catch many things, yeah, from when you try to differentiate the research and writing. I think it's very important to know the difference. Yeah, you can be good. You can do good, even the best. You think you are good at research, good at studying, but actually writing maybe, if not totally different, but actually is another thing. Yeah, you should to dig out. So yeah, first, when you talk, I have many questions. Yeah, just jump from but first let's just follow our plan. Okay, first. Yeah, if you have time, after we finish this planned questions, maybe I will still have more questions. Yeah, I want you to be. The next one, let's move to the key size you have gained about language learning and acquisition. Why I choose this question, I want to explain it. because for one of my career is language education. Actually, I am how to say that I'm an international Chinese teacher, and also in my university, and I also we have this major. I have to train, to teach, to guide, to teach my students. Their major is international Chinese education. Also
I see.
have another name is teaching Chinese to speakers of other languages, just like teaching English to speakers of other languages.
Mhm.
So yeah, so and I still want to back before you give us your brilliant idea. I still want to start. I want to back to the linguistics.
Mhm.
How usually we think that people maybe at last century at the 70s, at the 70s, I remember about 70s, that usually we think people, especially the kids, they gain their language, they get their language acquisition from the from to murmur the grown-ups, their parents, also maybe like to strengthen, I mean, strengthen to repeat and to
Mhm.
strengthen what they heard or what they taught by others. But
Mhm.
actually, then after then we have Chomsky and also the cognitive linguistics. We found that uh, at least the keys when we gain our first language is not from those things, from those behaviorist or behavior them theory. It's
Mhm.
not like the dog who feed them uh, which be fed with meat or without meat, they will have the conditional reaction. So people, we don't gain our language like that way. But for our science, for science process, we still know a very little about how people really how they get their language.
Yes.
Because because everyone we maybe have our own um, learning learning paths, also knowledge knowledge map to build to construct our own language, our own knowledge.
Mhm.
So as a very maybe if I think if you are not the best or the most popular uh, author of the linguistics book, uh, but you should on the list. So I think you are one of them. You are the one can give us some opinions about how about the people to gain their language,
Hmm.
learning and acquisition. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, uh, um, when it comes to language learning, I
Mm-hmm.
can really, I have to speak mostly from my own personal experience. I mean, you brought up how it was viewed in the 70s, well, how it was viewed by the behaviorists, by Chomsky, and I think actually within linguistics, the views are changing at this point. I think there is more emphasis on um, uh, I think the emphasis is moving away from this universal grammar and more towards um, uh, regional cultural differences between languages, and but that's not a discussion that I'm very familiar with, so I can't really answer your question in a up-to-date academic sense, my answer will be more about the experiences I've had with language learning myself and talking to other people who have learned languages. I hope that's not too much of a disappointment. And one thing that I've really found is that to become really fluent in a language, there is no other way than spending a lot of time with either native speakers or other people who are very fluent. I mean, not necessarily native speakers, but people who are very proficient in this language. It's just a matter of, well, racking up the miles, learning by doing. There's just no alternative, I think. I've spoken to people who have learned languages from books at their home, and they could speak understandably. They could also speak Dutch sometimes, but it always sounded a bit stilted or unnatural. So that is okay, but it's not fluency as I see it. Then the second thing that I would like to mention, and this is more psychological, and I think it's very important, to perfect your skills, to perfect one's skills, one has to accept one's own imperfection. And I find it very uncomfortable, very unpleasant to speak a language badly, which is what you do at first, right? I mean, the first year or years you speak a foreign language badly. And it's a major reason why I haven't achieved fluency or even practical working skills in most languages that I've tried to learn. I've mastered some, but I've certainly mastered fewer than I would have liked. There are only 3 that I can speak fairly well, except my own mother tongue, I mean. And that is because I was forced to go through that very uncomfortable phase of making many mistakes. I mean, when I was a teenager, I was in love with a German girl. So you want to talk, you have this very strong motivation to talk. So after a few years, I spoke German really well. And to this day, I feel comfortable in German, even though I sound a bit like a teenager and not like the 59-year-old man that I am today. I also learned good Spanish because I spent half a year in Peru. And well, when you spend half a year in a country, that really teaches you. And to this day, I feel comfortable in Spanish, even though my vocabulary is a bit rusty. And nowadays, I feel comfortable in English as well, because for the last 15 years, I've used that a lot, both in speech and in writing, professionally for my books, as we are talking now. But on the other hand, I've also I learned French in high school, but I've never become fluent in it. I've learned Polish, I've learned Vietnamese even, but I can't speak Polish or Vietnamese to save my life because I've never needed them. I've never had the necessity to use them and go through that uncomfortable stage of being bad at it. Okay, that's one. One was you need native speakers around you. The second one was, my second insight was you have to accept your own imperfection. And the third is, but it's a different sort of insight. And it's quite simply that it's much harder to become good at a language from a different part of the world. And well, I just mentioned that I tried to learn Vietnamese in the 2017, 18, 19. I didn't manage, but that's partly because Vietnamese, like Chinese, is so very different from European languages. And likewise, European languages are so very different from East Asian languages. I think for both of us, there is such a huge gap to bridge. I mean, I really admire you for having had the talent and energy to bridge that gap. I mean, you speak English. I have never managed to speak Vietnamese or Chinese because, well, I need hardly tell you how different the languages are with the classifiers in Chinese and in Vietnamese, words like ge and ben, and we don't have words like that. We just don't use them. There's the tone in the most East Asian languages that is very hard for us. European languages have all these endings and the declensions, the conjugations, which I guess must be a bit hard for East Asians to learn because it's really different. So these very big differences make it hard for Europeans to become fluent in East Asian languages, and for East Asian people, I guess, to become fluent in European languages. And that's without even mentioning the beautiful but difficult Chinese script, of course. So these are my three main insights, and I'm sure there are many more, but since this is not what I have specialized in, this is the best I can do for you.
Yeah, very impressive, especially when you mentioned that when you try to learn a new language, you always need to you need to find where to use it, right? And also you don't need to scare to make many mistakes, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, so yeah, let's just forget for a second for all those scientific things. Okay, so then maybe we can move to the next question. It's about the cultural aspects, right? That emerge when study languages. From your book, from this book, I think is not only I remember it's only maybe 1/3 is about the language itself. I mean, from the syntax, from the words, but I think there is also a big part. It's about the cultural issues, like also, for example, I think like the language ideology, language and the identity. I will belong all these things to the cultural aspects. If we can say culture is a bigger vision of human civilization. So yeah, so I I'm eager to learn from your insights about this part. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true that in writing Lingo and also my other book, Babel, I was
Yeah, Babel.
struck
Yeah.
by, which you know very well, don't you? I was struck by the cultural differences when it comes to language. That was, well, yeah, I guess that 25 years ago, I really wasn't so much aware of that. And it's even within Europe. I mean, Europe is a small continent, right? I mean, Europe has fewer people than China. But even within our small continent, there are so many cultural differences in the language, in the area of languages. Well, when it comes to East Asia, I'm not very familiar with East Asia, so I could think of one big difference, and that is the fact that in East Asia there is a strong tradition of calligraphic writing, which is part of the linguistic culture, right? And in Europe, we don't have such a strong tradition of calligraphic writing. There's a very strong tradition of typography, of developing new fonts, but not so much the handwriting. That's very much in China, I think also in Japan, Korea, and in the Arab world as well. Those two parts of the world have a very strong calligraphic tradition, not so much in Europe. But let me mention a few differences within Europe, because after all, this book Lingo is about European languages. One thing that has always struck me is that in France and also in other French-speaking countries, there is a very elitist approach to languages and very prescriptivist, very rule-centered. French speakers are really very attached to the rules of grammar and spelling and pronunciation. When a person does not speak just right, exactly as they do in Paris, it's very hard for them to be taken seriously in French culture. And that may be changing a bit nowadays. I don't want to overstate it, but it's certainly an old tradition in French that you still feel when you talk to people, they really have a very strong attachment to the niceties and formality of their language. Whereas, for instance, in Norway, even though Norwegian people are really interested in their language, they are very tolerant when it comes to different pronunciations. They like people to speak their own regional dialects, even in formal situations, even in media, even on stage and theaters. So that's really exactly the opposite of what you see in France. Another difference between European languages is that some, for instance, Italian and Spanish, the speakers of those languages do not easily accept new loanwords from English, for instance. They do have loanwords, both from English and other languages, but it's a trickle rather than an avalanche. I mean, they don't accept all that many. Whereas in some other languages, including my own Dutch, but also German nowadays, and even colloquial French, perhaps not official French, but colloquial French, there are lots and lots of English loanwords. And people will even use English words that they happen to know, that they like, and they will just insert them into their Dutch or German conversation. You don't find that so much in Spanish and Italian, I think, or in Polish. It really depends on the language and on the language culture.
Mhm.
Then yet another difference is that in some linguistic areas in Europe, there is a strong acceptance of spelling reform. Again, Norway is a good example. My own Dutch is a fairly good example. Whereas in other languages, spelling reform is simply off the books. And that is, I mean, that is just not acceptable, just not possible. And perhaps the best example of that, unfortunately, is English. I mean, English could really do with a good spelling reform, but it's never going to happen. There is no authority to do that. There is no expectation of that happening. There's also the problem of there being so many countries now speaking English with slightly different accents. So English is going to be stuck with its current spelling, probably for good. Whereas Norwegian, for instance, has seen many spelling reforms in the course of the 20th century, and maybe even the 21st, I'm not sure. There's one more European tradition that linguistic cultural tradition that I would like to mention, and it's an unfortunate one. For more than 200 years now, we here in Europe have had this idea that every country needs its own language, one language, and that every language needs its own country. And of course, in reality, that is not exactly the case. There are quite a few linguistic minorities which do not have their own country. And there are several countries that do not have their own language, like Belgium and Switzerland and Kosovo and some 2 or 3 more. But on the whole, Europe over the past 200 years has moved towards a situation where each country has its own language and each language has its own country, roughly, very roughly, which has led to a lot of tensions, political tensions, to a lot of bloodshed, to a lot of large countries splitting up into smaller countries. And it is all down to this nationalistic idea that of one nation, one, what is it again? One nation, one people, one language. Is that right? Yes. That has really been a driving force in European history for the last 250 years. And it has, of course, nowadays with the European Union, that is moving a bit in the other direction, but not very strongly. This is still roughly how Europeans think. And outside Europe, that ideology, you used the word ideology earlier on, and I think that's a good term for this, that is much weaker or even absent. You don't find this in Latin America. You don't find it so much in Africa. You find it a bit in Asia, but nowhere near as strongly as in Europe. And I was struck by how in India, your big neighbor, they have a very different ideology. Well, one of your big neighbors, you have several big neighbors. In India, the connection is not so much between language and nation state, but it's between, they have it a bit, but not so strongly. It's between language and script. In India, every language wants to have its own script. So Hindi, the big language, has its own Devanagari script, but also Bengali has its own Bengali script, Punjabi has one, Tamil has one, Malayalam has one, etc., etc. And even smaller languages in India with just a few million speakers or even fewer, even they are nowadays developing their own scripts. And to us from Europe, that is a very unexpected development. But then it isn't any sillier than the European idea that every nation should have its own language and every language should have its own nation. So it is a big difference, and I wrote about that in Babel, in Babie, I think it's called in Chinese.
I have we have the Babel is already have the Chinese version.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. I read that. Yeah. Okay. So when I propose for the last question as planned, it's about I want to know your observations on language evolution and change, because for me, I read some papers. They said maybe for the next maybe the 50 to 100 years, most language may be involved or maybe just disappeared because of the evolution of language. So only few languages will stay. But you suggest maybe we can talk about more about not only about the language evolution, but about that you mentioned that most European languages are not as different from each other as many European people think.
Mm-hmm.
Linguistic diversity in East Asia is undoubtedly greater than in Europe. So
we can talk about both things.
Yeah. It's very interesting because it's also one of my field. So actually, I think you find a big thing. For many people, I think, especially people from the Western world, especially from not only from Europe but also from the English world. Usually they think because they think we have similar face. We are Asians. Right? Actually, be seriously, that's totally wrong, right? Because from the linguistics book, usually we will see many linguists will agree that Japanese is one of the most difficult languages in the whole world. But also for the Korean, you mentioned that East Asia, and also even for Chinese. When we talk about Chinese, usually we talk about the 普通话 or the standard Chinese. But actually, we have so many, we call them dialects. But if we try to use suppose, no offense, if whole Europe, just like China, Europe is a country. You know what I mean? Yeah, maybe yes, sure. So for so many, just like the example you raised, like the Norway, the Danish, right? And also German, many European languages, maybe they will also be attributed to dialects.
Oh
If
yes,
we,
I agree. I agree.
so yeah, actually, I think you find a big thing that yeah, in China, in East Asia, we have the big or the bigger linguistic diversity than
Mhm.
Europe. So yeah, so yeah,
Yes, and you are
that's what
mentioning
I
now the big languages like Chinese and its so-called dialects, but also you mentioned Japanese and Korean, and I would like to add Vietnamese. But of course, within China, there are all these other minority languages that are not related to the Chinese language. There are some Thai languages, I think. There are the
mm,
languages known as
mm.
Hmong-Mien in English, but I think they're called Mao Yao in Chinese or something like that, I believe.
Uh,
There is of
what
course, sorry?
what? Sorry. When you say Mao Yao, what?
Yeah, Miao Yao, that these languages in the south, small languages in the south of China. Uh,
Miao Miao.
that's right.
You mean the yeah Miao yeah.
Those are the ones I mean. I mean, they're
Okay.
small, I know, but they are still
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
Um,
Mm,
and
mm,
there used to be Manchu, of course, which is now nearly extinct, I believe. And in Japan, there is still Ainu, which is also
mm,
almost extinct.
mm,
There is Tibetan, which is a bit more closely related to Chinese, but still quite different. There's
mm.
Mongolian, the Mongolic languages.
Yeah.
There is so much diversity, whereas and they're all different families. I mean, Japanese and Chinese and Korean and Vietnamese and Miao Yao and Mongolic and all the other ones, they're different families. Whereas in Europe, we have basically nearly only Indo-European. Now, Indo-European is a big family and there are substantial differences, but you can still tell that they're related. We have some exceptions like Basque. Basque is an exception, it's unrelated, and there is Finnish and Estonian and Hungarian. Those are different, but 90% or perhaps 95% of Europeans speak a language that is Indo-European in its origins, and you can tell. Moreover, over the past 2000 years, these European languages have become even more similar because of our shared history. Europe, as you know, has never been a big empire, unlike China, but the contacts in terms of trade, cooperation, war, mutual influence, in cultural influence, translation, shared religion, all of that have caused Europe really to become a fairly close-knit cultural area. And that has affected, not affected, that sounds negative, that has influenced the languages very much. And nowadays, when a European like myself learns another European language, you find so much that is familiar. However, most of us don't realize it. Most of us Europeans don't realize that. We see the differences. But as soon as you try to learn Chinese or Vietnamese or, I don't know, Swahili or Guarani in other parts of the world, you come to realize how similar the European languages really are. They're still hard enough to learn. I mean, we talked about that before, that learning a language is always hard. You make all these mistakes. It's embarrassing. But really, they are pretty similar. Linguistic diversity between Japanese and Chinese and Vietnamese and Manchu and Tibetan and Mongolian is much, much bigger than here in Europe. Of course, Chinese has influenced Japanese and Vietnamese and Korean in particular. There are very clear signs of influence, partly in the script, but especially in some of the vocabulary. So there has been some leveling in East Asia as well. But I think that's especially the smaller languages like Mongolian and Miao Yao and the Thai languages are still very different from Chinese. And you also mentioned, if I may, you were asking about the evolution of language and how some of them, or many of them even, may go extinct. I am actually writing a book about that, so maybe we can talk about it again in a few years, but let's talk about it now as well. I believe that people will prefer to speak the language that they need for their communication needs. That they, if I live in a small village and I just work on my field and I hardly speak to people from the outside, I only need a language for my own little village, for my own little community. And that language will become more and more different from the surrounding languages. But that is not what today's world is like. Today's world is more like being in direct contact, as we are now, with somebody 6 time zones away. And today's world is more like meeting hundreds of people every year, traveling abroad perhaps and speaking to even more people, reading news about foreign countries. It's about being on the telephone to people with a different accent, with a different dialect. It's about reading books in a standard language. In other words, we no longer lead our lives locally. We lead it at least nationally and partly internationally. So our communications needs are much more, what would be the right word for that? We need to share a language with a great number of people. That is what we want as individuals. That's what our life leads to. And the logical result of that is that the local language, a small language, becomes less important. It may still be important for your identity. I'm not saying that the small languages are disappearing overnight. I think they will actually cling on for several more generations. But there will, well, I think actually that China is a very good example. If I'm correctly informed, ever more people in China speak the national language, the what we call Mandarin, and you used a different word for it, the standard Chinese. Still today, nowadays, I think most people still also speak their regional variety of Chinese, but it seems likely that in 2 or 3 generations, perhaps, people no longer do. I'm not sure about this. You know more about this than I do. But it's certainly true in Europe that regional dialects are gradually disappearing, and small languages like Icelandic or Lithuanian may also be at risk in the longer run. So I think a century from now, there will still be hundreds of languages, maybe even a few thousand, but certainly fewer than now. We have 7,000 or so now. And that is not because the small languages are suppressed. It's because people feel the need to speak these bigger languages. I mean, of course, there has been a lot of linguistic repression as well over the centuries. I'm not denying that at all. But in today's world, it's very much about people's choice to speak something that they feel is useful for them. And that is very often a national language and or even an international language. So yes, I do think there will be a lot of language extinction. I do think it's a melancholy thing to happen. We will miss those languages as linguists and also as maybe romantics. But I think it's an inevitable process. I'm not saying, though, if I may continue still a bit, I'm not saying that we will end up with just 1 or 2 or 3 languages. I don't think that. If only because I think technology will probably intervene. Machine translation is already very good. I mean, I can probably read your Chinese translation of my book by using an app to see what it says in English, to translate it back. But machine interpretation is also getting better. It's not quite there yet, but it's getting better. And I suspect that in 5 or 10 years' time, it will be pretty good. When that is the case, you and I could have this conversation, me speaking in English, or maybe even in Dutch, you speaking in standard Chinese or whatever variety that you prefer. I don't know.
My hometown dialect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And technology would help us understand each other quite seamlessly. And the same would be true, not just for Chinese and Dutch, of course, but also for French and English and Korean and Vietnamese and Spanish, etc., etc. And once that is feasible and once that is standard and affordable, there will be much less motivation to learn foreign languages for the very reason that I mentioned earlier. The communications needs are paramount. So if we can communicate through technology, we can't yet, but I think it's coming. If we can do that, we will just be lazy and speak our own language and let the technology take care of the interpretation. So maybe that technology will even save linguistic diversity in the not so long run, in the near future. That is how of course, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not sure, but that might well be the trend for the future.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. You inspire me because yeah, before we move on, it's already 1.5 hours. I just want to ask you, is there any possible I will have the honor to invite you to give me a foreword for my book. I just write a book about how the educational technology to reshape the international Chinese education. So it will be published by Springer Nature. Yeah, it's totally right in English. I'm delayed for that. Also for even half a year, but the good part is I almost finished. So I just think maybe I can invite you to give me a foreword.
Oh yeah, of course, no problem.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
And when you say Chinese, international Chinese education, that means teaching Chinese to non-Chinese people, right? Including Westerners. Is that right?
My book is mainly talk about, because you just mentioned that when in near future, when we have the stronger, the better AI translation machines or extra, so maybe the small language won't extinct, right? Because because we have more powerful tool to let us to understand each other. So I think this makes sense. So I just jump this idea. I can invite you to write a foreword. My book is mainly focused on how these new technologies, we call it educational technology, for example, the not only AI, but we say that metaverse, AR, VR, virtual reality, augmented reality, and also like the MOOC, also all those things like the hardwares, softwares, how they when they come together, they will make a new picture.
Yes.
I focus on the Chinese language learning or education, but actually I think all these new technologies will reshape all language education, just
Yeah.
like your idea. But you also, yeah, give me a very good idea that, yeah, maybe the new technology AI will protect the small languages
Yes.
to let them to live longer, because now we don't need to ask people to even
Oh.
sorry. Sorry.
There was an
Sorry, because
interruption.
yeah, interruption. Yeah. I mean, maybe in near future, maybe we don't need to ask the students, ask our kids to learn the second language or the third language, if not for their own interest, but
Exactly.
for the, yeah, to force them to learn the foreign language, because
Mm.
we don't need to do that, because we can understand each other, whether no matter what you are speaking.
Yeah, it will be
Yeah.
interesting to see how
Yeah.
well that technology works.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I mean, in a conversation, there is this whole flow of uh, body language, intonation, all sorts of subtleties that may be missed in translation, perhaps. So
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if the AI interpretation will always be second rate compared to direct communication. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that most people who learn the language basically for very um, pragmatic reasons, to buy and sell or to be able to travel, things like that, that those people will lose the motivation to learn languages, whereas people with a keener interest in culture, in literature, in international context, they may still benefit from language learning, but the number of people will be far smaller than today. It is my suspicion. Is my hunch.
Yeah, okay. So you just mentioned, because I just wonder your writing plan, but I guess you already give us answer that you are writing a book about the
Ah,
language evolution, right? So,
actually, I'm working on two books.
oh, two books. Would you like to share your yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can certainly share the information about one book because that will be out next year. That is
Okay.
a language atlas, so a book with like roughly 100 maps
Mm-hmm.
showing where languages are spoken, giving information about official languages, about grammatical structures, about history, of course. I love history. A lot of that. We are already at an advanced stage that will be published in English and hopefully also in other languages, of course. That is what I'm working on. Well, that is what I will be working on after this conversation. I mean, that's really my current activity, my current job. The other is about small languages and their possible extinction. Well, it's not so much about extinction, but that is just one of the elements, one of the aspects that I will be dealing with. It will also be about what makes those languages interesting, what makes small and usually unwritten languages different from the big written languages that you and I are familiar with. So I don't want to give too many details about that book yet.
Okay. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
in it will take
Okay.
a few more years, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't want somebody else to do the same, right?
Yeah. I just as your fans, as your reader, so I just want to know, yeah, you have
Yeah, of course, I
that
understand that.
new
Yes,
fan. Yeah. We need to protect our own idea very well.
exactly.
I
A
totally,
little
I
bit.
totally agree with that.
I don't want to be
So
too suspicious.
yeah. So let's back to the still we focus on the language evolution. From Lingo, you for the last chapter you mentioned Chinese, right? You mentioned
Ah, yes.
not only English but also Chinese. Uh, you said that maybe English could be the next world or global language, right? Uh,
Spanish, right? Isn't it
no, no,
Spanish?
no, I mean, you say Chinese, right? You mentioned that Chinese maybe could be the next,
Yeah, it is
yeah,
certainly
global
one.
language. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah. So, but I think when you write this book, it's almost 10 years ago.
True.
What's your opinion now?
Well, actually, one thing that my answer is actually the answer I've given just now, that I gave just now, namely the idea that, well, English is the world language today, de facto. It's the language that you will find all over the world. In some places, many people speak, in other places, not so many people, but still, it's the go-to lingua franca.
Uh-huh.
And for a while, I did think that Chinese would be the next lingua franca, but there are two reasons why I don't think so. One reason is that there are many more English speakers in China than Chinese speakers outside China. And
Mhm.
of course, Chinese is difficult not only for Westerners. Chinese is actually difficult for most people in the world. I mean, I'm not saying that English is easy, certainly not. But I think for somebody in South America or Africa or in the Pacific Ocean, I believe my impression is that Chinese is harder to learn than English because of the tones, because of the script. That is really, those are the things that make Chinese special and beautiful, but also harder. But the other thing is technology, the thing that I mentioned just now. I suspect that in 1 or 2 generations, there will no longer be lingua franca. I think people will speak their national language or their regional language. When I say regional, I mean uh, like of several countries,
Mhm.
and they will use their, I don't know, telephone or some other device to make themselves understood in international contacts. So maybe lingua franca will be a thing of the past, a global lingua franca.
Mhm.
Um, I can't remember, frankly, what was my conclusion in Lingo. I haven't read Lingo for a while, as you can understand. I think I thought I
Let's
suggested Spanish, but
um yeah, let's try to um let's permit me to uh yeah, yeah, you at the last let's the last paragraph you just said that uh and what would it mean for native English speakers if
oh,
if Chinese were to achieve global dominance?
yeah. I remember now. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've really changed my mind since then. I wrote this in, I think in 2011 or 12, no, later, 2013
Uh-huh.
or early 2014, something like that. And I really
Uh-huh.
have changed my mind about that. On
Uh-huh.
the other hand, I mean, since English speakers are so notoriously monolingual, it would be a good thing for them to learn Chinese.
So yeah. Um, okay, so it's almost 1.5 hour. So at the end of today's interview, what would you like to say to our Chinese readers, to your readers? Mm,
I find it
mm,
admirable that Chinese readers take an interest in, well, these Chinese readers anyway, take an interest in a cultural phenomenon on the other side of the world, so to speak. I mean, it speaks for a great cultural openness to take an interest in that. I think that if a book about East Asian languages were published in Europe or in the United States, I am very much afraid that only a few specialists, I mean, I would read it for sure. I have read about Chinese and East Asian languages, but it sounds as if the cultural openness and the curiosity about what's going on elsewhere in the world may, at this point in time, be greater among Chinese readers than among European readers, and I think that's all for the better. In the sense, I should say that differently. That is really an asset to China as a society. I really regret that in the Western world nowadays there is a sort of I'm getting tired. My English is getting worse and worse. In the Western world, there's a growing inward attitude, looking inward instead of looking outward. And here's hoping that in China there is still the desire to look outward. And reading this book and reading many other books, of course, seems to be a sign of that. So I welcome that. Thank you. And I'm not saying this because I want to sell my books. I do want to sell my book, that is true, but that's not the reason why I'm saying it.
Okay, thank you. I think I also want to thank you not only for today's interview, for your time, but also thank you for your honest. I'm very precious for that. I think he's a very good character or personality, to be honest. Even you want, every author wants his or her book to sell a lot, right? to sell a lot. But actually, you can be honest that after 10 years, you change your mind.
Right, yes.
You change your mind, and also you give us, I think, is very precious opinion and suggestions about how to cheat language, how to cheat different languages, how to learn language, right? How to embrace the different culture. I guess after so many years, you still remember the preface we choose together for Chinese reader, right? You still remember that? Yeah, I mean the preface.
The preface.
It is from one of your presentation from the TED Talk. It's
yes.
about that to grow up.
Right, yes.
Yes, to learn a new language.
Grow up and learn a second language. Yes.
Yeah. I also I'm fancy for that. I think it's the point. Why we need to learn a new language is not to get a higher mark to graduate from, to get a better certificate.
I still agree. I haven't changed my mind on that. I still agree with myself there. And with you.
It's a joke. So for China, for Chinese, after maybe some historians think we have more than 5,000 years history, but the others think maybe not so long. But one of our civilization's feature is we can integrate we can observe many new things, different things, not only our culture, but our language. So you can also find that in Chinese, we have so many loan words, right? Not only words themselves, but also the ideas, the concepts, right, from other language. So I hope maybe in future, but maybe not in near future, maybe we can cooperate. Maybe we can write in similar way like we write Lingo. Maybe we can try to figure out together, or maybe you're always the better one. I can assist you. We can write a Lingo not about the European languages, but about the Asian languages.
That would certainly be a job that a Chinese or Japanese or Korean writer could probably do better than I.
Yeah. Because I just realized during the interview, I realized that you know a lot. You pay attention a lot about East about the Asian languages. You yeah you
Well,
yeah
thank you. I wouldn't say a lot, but it's part of my job as a linguist to know about languages all over the world, really. And of course, the East Asian languages are very interesting. There is that. Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
So thank
Thank you
you,
very much
Mr.
for all
Dorren.
your
Yeah,
compliments, and thank you very much for
yeah,
your interesting questions. And of course, thank you very much for
yeah,
translating my book. I
yeah.
can't read the translation, but I'm sure you have made a good job of it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So after the interview, I will send my book, my manuscript to you. Thank you again to your grade to give my book a forward. So thank you
No
for that.
problem. Yes, I'll do that. I'll do that.
Okay. So
Very
yeah,
much.
after our interview, I will before I publish it, I will give you to confirm for
Yes.
all the part. Okay.
Okay. Very good.
Okay. Okay.
Um, okay. Thanks again. Have a nice evening. I think it's almost evening with you, right? Yeah. Have a nice evening,
Yeah.
and I'll
Afternoon. Still afternoon.
afternoon. Okay. 17 hours. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And I'm expecting your transcript then by email. Excellent.
Okay.
Okay.
So in future, welcome to China. When you consider to do visit to China, let me know. I hope I could be one of the guys who have the honor to invite you a dinner or have
Oh,
a real face-to-face conversation again.
that would be terrific. Yeah, I certainly will. You live in Shanghai, that area?
Shanghai,
Shanghai?
Shanghai.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Excellent. Yeah.
yeah. Welcome to Shanghai.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Have a nice day, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, okay. Have a
Bye
nice
bye.
day. Bye bye.